you said you're from Chicago. Sorry, pardon me while I take this off. It's really sweaty in here. Your thoughts when you saw the newspaper? If you saw it, I don't.
I did see that article, and
I mean, to be honest, I saw it on Facebook, and then you had to pay for it, so I didn't read the whole article.
Comparing
I got the
Chicago and St. Louis, they're two very, very different cities of different scales. I mean, Scott's exactly right. For Atlanta to be looking outward at other cities and what they're doing makes a lot of sense. I also think that was not a completely fair analysis of St. Louis that Atlanta did. I mean, look, we've had some challenges as of late, the last 6 to 8 months especially, but you want to say St. Louis is not a better place now than it was 20 years ago? I mean, we've come a long way, and we still have a lot more work to do.
I don't know, though. I think it does at least show some of the challenges. It at least shows that St. Louis has a PR problem, that people are looking, what's the worst possible city we can compare at what we want to be to, and they pick St. Louis. That's a serious problem. And I don't know if, I think politicians like to say, we're so much better than we were 20 years ago, but if you look 20 years ago, we've lost a lot of corporations in the last 20 years. We've lost Anheuser-Busch, we've lost Ralston Purina, we've lost A.G. Edwards. All these things are gone. These big corporations that used to be here, they're not here anymore. I'm not sure, crime seems to remain the same. I mean, I'm not exactly sure St. Louis is this great garden spot compared to what it was.
And I moved back 20 years ago, and I will tell you that one of the first things I noticed was when the bad news hit, i.e. American Airlines, and they bought TWA, and the line coming out of downtown RCGA is like, this is the best thing that could happen, because now this is going to happen. And we always do this. And we said, I'm not saying you have to jump worst case scenario, but there isn't a lot of progressive thinking. Now, hopefully these younger people who have been elected can help us possibly, do a little bit more than that. But you're absolutely right. As far as just look who left. And we always say, it was because of this, or it was because of that. Well, don't make it an excuse. Let's try to figure out why. And if I could snap my fingers and do one thing that would change this, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 4 years. These other places have large mass transit systems, and if I could snap my fingers and bring D.C. system to St. Louis, I think that would help solve so many of our problems.
So I think what he touches on is the least productive thing you can do is worry about a PR problem. You should worry about doing the actual improvements. We spend a lot of time, I've seen this, we fight about whether the crime statistics are fair between us and other regions. Right. Let's just worry about the fact that crime is too high and try to fix it, and then the statistics will take care of themselves. We sort of dither on mass transit. We were a leader 20 years ago on mass transit. We're not now. Other regions have passed us by very quickly and continue to move ahead. We shouldn't rest on the laurels of what we did 20 years ago. We should be working now to make these improvements that position us for the future.
Follow up. Okay, it was decided by somebody somewhere that we had to have a new stadium. Look how quickly this has progressed to where, maybe it's viable, who knows, but people made up their minds, we have to have this stadium. Well, why don't we do that with Metro? And, why don't we just say, listen, we are going to decide some things for you, community, and this is one of them. Because that's what Washington did. People had the same complaints. I don't want the Metro coming to my neighborhood, blah, there goes my TV and all that mess. All right, but they did it, and now it's a wonderful thing. So if we're going to make decisions like that, how about not limiting them to, a few hundred acres downtown? How about it involves the entire region?
Probably because that's what most people are concerned about.
Well, sometimes you have to say, hey, trust us. And I know that sounds crazy, but yeah.
Federal government probably paid for most of the MetroLink up front.
Nope, not the last one.
Not the last one.
The initial, I'm talking 1995.
Sure, the federal government, not most. Federal government will pay at most about half of mass transit projects.
Most of it's through a sales tax, which I think isn't that pretty unusual?
We are unusual because Missouri does nothing to support mass transit.
We get more from Illinois, even though we get more riders on this side of the
Metro. Yes, Metro gets dramatically more money from Illinois than from Missouri. And I think Alvin touches on this too. A stadium is so important that the governor will do a press conference downtown to talk about it. I would love a press conference about how we have 100 soccer fields that are in great shape for kids to play on, and we have 50 baseball fields in the city that are in great shape for kids to play on. How we're going to execute and have a MetroLink expansion in the next 8 years. Those things would pay off much more honestly than a stadium would. And there's you look to Jefferson City, and you just get crickets on these things that I think are very important to St. Louis residents.
And I think that does showcase one problem in St. Louis is you have a sort of outstate Missouri sentimentality placed particularly on transportation. And so MoDOT will put this sort of suburban or even predominantly rural view on the urban street grid, and it just makes absolutely no sense, some of the things that they do. And that is something that a lot of elected leaders should be fighting for, and something the governor could be a lot more involved in, instead of just always being here for the stadium and nothing else.
Yeah.
Maybe it goes back a little full circle to you guys getting elected. If you're elected, maybe does that mean that this is what people south of Cherokee, Jefferson, however the boundaries were that I can't remember, Chippewa, is that what are the things we're talking about here, what your folks are talking about?
Absolutely. The Metrolink was a key part of my campaign. Folks south of Cherokee and the south side want to see an adequate form of public transportation serving our neighborhoods, but it also connects the north side too. I mean, it's an issue of social justice that I think progressive folks in the city of St. Louis really want to see. Any top-notch city in the United States, in the world in fact, has a high-quality public transportation system, and we are simply lacking it here in the city. And what's even more egregious is that we passed Proposition A out in St. Louis County, I don't know, 4 years ago, and we've been collecting sales tax in the region for the particular expansion of the north-south line. And I think it just is going to take some of us to be really pushing for it and making sure that our regional leaders are getting behind it.
But you can't just snap your fingers like Alvin said. It takes money.
That's true. Well, and I understand that, but like I say, it seems like we find money for things what we want to find money for. And this is one where we need to find some money to get this the north-south. And I've said this before too, but if you wanted to create some lines that paid for themselves, as much talk as you hear that people don't want it, if you ran a line or a train on existing tracks from west to east, people would pay to use it. That would be one of the first things that just paid for itself, because commuters in the morning would take it. And why hasn't it taken us this long to even figure that out? Because that's the first thing other places did.
The stadium is what, $1 billion project? Yeah. The north-south Metrolink is what, $1.5 billion? I mean, and we've already got almost $500 million with this Prop A money. I mean, we're getting on that with the with the 10-year span of it. So I mean, it's really not that big of a project.
Yeah, and one of the other things is St. Louis County's involvement. And from talking with St. Louis County Executive Steve Stanger, I think he is, I don't want to say he's gung-ho about a north-south Metrolink, but I think he's probably willing to be a partner in that, because even if it's, I would assume a north-south Metrolink would go into St. Louis County as well.
It absolutely does.
So I mean,
to Westport, right?
I think he's pretty receptive about the idea, and if you get a partner like St. Louis County, which has a lot of revenue there, then maybe you can actually get that happening. So.
He doesn't want the city to be part of the county. He doesn't want the county to pay for any part of the
He hasn't
stadium.
said that. He's just not a big Better Together fanatic, basically.
He said it's off the table, has he not? It's
Pretty much, yeah.
But he basically has said, and this is pretty consistent, that he wants to study the situation himself. He's not like a couple of the Republican candidates for county executive who are gung-ho against it, but I mean, he has flat out said it's not a priority right now, especially post-Ferguson, and I think that pretty much takes it off the table for now.
He threatened to sue if they didn't take his name off of the letterhead. I think that's pretty...
Well, being against Better Together is different than being against the idea of a city-county merger, because we don't know exactly what Better Together, their ultimate end goal is, because their merger, quote-unquote, could be a lot different than the city just re-entering the county. It could be a mega merger, as I like to call it, the Tony Messenger plan.
So. Well,
did I cut you off?
Well, back to something that Alvin said earlier, when we have projects we want to do, we generally can find the money for them somewhere. In this town, it seems we often think it's one or the other. It's a stadium or Metrolink. Why can't we figure out a way to do both? Why can't we start looking at plans for revitalizing the riverfront, building a stadium, and also expanding rapid transit and moving people more north-south in this town? I think we got to start thinking bigger and figure out a way to do both.
Yeah, you mentioned, we were talking about East St. Louis earlier, and I've always had this thing, I call it the Reed plan. I said, boy, I tell you, East St. Louis could be fixed because it's not that big, and you don't have that many people there anymore. Now that would be one. If I really, really had a lot of money and maybe lived in Illinois or someplace else, I would look at literally buying East St. Louis. I mean, because you can start. I mean,
Put your football stadium there.
If Cincinnati, when I was an intern there in 1981,
Yeah.
Covington and Newport were like our Metro East Side. Go back now. It's a show place. Everybody wants to live over there and look back at the stadium and all that in Cincinnati.
Well, I asked Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner about building the stadium in Illinois, and he was receptive about it. Some people were like, that's a stupid question to ask because it's never going to happen. It may never happen. It probably won't, but in that instance, first of all, you'd be revitalizing a part of the Metro East, and if you could get both states to pay for it, maybe the cost will go down, with the bonds. But again, I'm not holding my breath on that one, but it's maybe an out-of-the-box idea that no one has thought
I
of.
think Alvin was saying he wants to be the Paul McKee of East St. Louis.
Yeah.
No, I would actually have
is
to have
that
some
what I heard?
money.
It's good.
also-
Money doesn't fix everything.
But also sort of recenter the energy of the St. Louis greater region. So,
Right.
I mean, you
There-
start putting people on the east side and.
There was an effort many years ago to put the airport in.
Yeah, in
St.
Columbia
Louis,
Waterloo.
And then that all failed because the St. Louis County people said, oh my God, how could you possibly put it in Illinois? And every time we've talked about that, that's what happened. And the airport, I think you could look back and probably the region would be a lot better off because it would be a lot more centralized if we had done something like that.
Right.
Because we have people in Missouri who pretend that Illinois doesn't exist. And even though East St. Louis is a closer neighbor to the city of St. Louis than half these other places that we talk about and worry about so much. And that's why people keep moving further and further and further out west. And St. Louis is going in the city. To them, that's an afterthought. They almost look down upon the city. And that's not something that happens in Illinois.
Well, you got to. One of the reasons why Kansas City proper might be thriving is because the
itself.
Kansas side is thriving too.